The Strawberry Roan was written by Curley Fletcher. Curley Fletcher was a much-loved cowboy poet and a sure enough real buckaroo. Spent most of his time in California and in Nevada, but did get down into Arizona a few times. He was pretty much a big, wide, open desert kind of a cowboy. He wrote a lot of songs about that. His most famous poem, or song, as it was set to music later, Strawberry Roan. And it's not about the desert or anything else. It's just about the kind of wild horses that people had to tame back in his era. Today, we see people riding broncs coming out of a chute at a rodeo. Even in the early rodeos, it didn't happen that way. In fact, they did it the way that horse trainers did it. They snubbed a horse, which meant they tied him up to a pole in the middle of the arena and then tied up his feet and then got the saddle on, and they cinched down this saddle really tight and then put blinds on the horse so that the horse couldn't see. This sometimes actually made things worse because horses panic when they can't see. But they would get this horse all tied up and they'd get the blinds on it. They'd get on the horse's back in a saddle, then they'd pull those blinds off and that horse would just go crazy. And the man who could stay on was the man who tamed the horse. This is not exactly the horse whispering method that we hear about so much today, the way of breaking broncs. It really was a bronc busting situation. And it was caused, of course, the way that the human beings were treating the horses that made the horses that way. They might not have been that wild if we'd have had people like Dr. Miller around in those days and some of the other people who pioneered a different method of breaking horses. In this song, there's something that I have a little bit of personal experience with. My granddad used to go to town in Texas only on Saturday. He would go down to the town square. On that town square, certain times of the year, you would experience the unemployment agency of the cowboy world. These were drifters who had good saddle rigs and good equipment, but they didn't know where they were going to be working next. That's why they called them drifters. A lot of them were bronc busters because most ranchers didn't want to get on these wild horses and ruin their chances of being an entrepreneur for the rest of their lives. So they got on the backs of these horses only vicariously through these young men that they hired. There'd be a lot of these young men around the city square, and the old ranchers would walk around and talk to them. And my granddad would always ask them if he could see their pocket knife. And if it was well oiled and it was sharpened, that was a thing in his favor. They didn't need a resume, they just needed to look at the guy's hands and look at the guy's saddle to see if it was smoothed out. A roughed out saddle that was too new was a sign that somebody didn't know what they were doing. A well-polished saddle, polished by the butts of these young cowboys who had been doing it already for a long time, was a good sign that it was going to be a good situation for hiring this person. Generally, they'd ask him to come down on Sunday, and on Sunday they'd sit around and eat, and my granddad would watch them eat. And if they ate good, that was a sign that the cowboy might be somebody you'd want to hire. My granddad would never hire a cowboy that didn't eat good. And then the next morning, they'd take him down to the corral and say, all right, let's see what you can do. And of course, they'd always give that cowboy the worst horse on the place. If he could tackle that first, or as we would say in the business world today, if he could eat the frog, you know, the toughest problem first, then he usually had a chance of getting the job. But if he got bucked off, he didn't get the offer. Of course, they would say, we'll give you $10 to try to ride the horse, and maybe we'll give you some more money if you ride some more horses. It was always a contract labor situation. So in it, Curley Fletcher describes this exact scene that I saw as a boy in the 1950s. Cowboy is drifting around. Up walks a rancher, says, I hear you're a good bronc buster, let's see what you can do. And he takes him out, and the description of the Strawberry Roan in this is one of the most hilarious pieces of lyric in any Western song. The horse is obviously a wreck because he's caused so many wrecks, but they keep him around just to make sure that the next cowboy really knows his stuff.
Hanging around town, spending my time. I was out of a job and not earning a dime, when a fella stepped up and he said, I suppose you're a bronc rider by the looks of your clothes. Well, he figures me right, I'm a good one, I claim. Did you happen to have any bad ones to tame? Said I got one and a mean one to buck. Throwing good riders, he's had lots of luck. Well, he offers me 10, and I says, I'm your man. The bronc, he ain't living, and I cannot fan. The bronc never tried, and he never drew breath. I cannot ride till he starves plumb to death. So he says, get your saddle, I'll give you a chance. So he hops in the buckboard and we drive to the ranch. And the very next morning, right after Chuck, I stepped out to see if this outlaw could buck. Down in the horse corral, standing alone, was an old caballo, Strawberry Roan. Had little pin ears that touched at the tip. He had a big 44 brand on his left hip. He spavined all around and he had pigeon toes, little pig eyes and a big Roman nose. He was ewe-necked and old with a long lower jaw. He could tell with one eye was a regular outlaw. Well, I got the blinds on him, it was a terrible fight. I cinched down the saddle and I girded it tight. Then I steps on him and raises the blind. Look out, boys, he's gonna unwind. And he bows his old neck and I'll say he unwound. He ceased to quit living down here on the ground. Goes up in the east, comes down in the west. And me and my saddle is to doing my best. Well, he's sure a frog walker and he heaves a big sigh. And he only lacks wings for the bee on the fly. And he turns his old belly right up to the sun. Sure is a sun-fishing son of a gun. He's about the worst bronco I've seen on the range. He can land on a nickel and hand you the change. Goes up on all fours, comes down on his side. Don't see how I kept from losing my hide. I lost my saddle, I lost my hat. I was pulling at leather and I was blind as a bat. With one phenomenal jump, he makes a high dive, leaves me winding up there in the sky. But I turn 40 flips and I come back to earth. And I laid there cussing the day of my birth. I know there are ponies I cannot ride. Some of them are living and they haven't all died. But I bet you $10 ain't no man alive who can stay on old Strawberry when he makes his high dive.